In the dark midst of my dreams, I saw my brothers. The three dark figures silently beckoned me to follow them. They led me over the goat path, across the bridge to the house of the sinful woman. We walked across the well worn path in silence. The door to Rosie's house opened, and I caught a glimpse of the women who lived there. There was smoke in the air, sweet from the fragrance of perfume, and there was laughing. My brothers pointed for me to enter. A young woman laughed gaily. She bowed, and the soft flesh of her breasts hung loose and curved like cow udders. When my mother washed her long black hair, she tucked in the collar of her blouse, and I could see her shoulders and the pink flesh of her throat. The water wet her blouse, and the thin cotton fabric clung around the curve of her breast. No, I shouted in my dream. I cannot enter. I cannot think those thoughts. I am to be a priest. My brothers laughed and pushed me aside. Do not enter, I cried. It is written on the waters of the river that you shall lose your souls to hell if you enter. Bah, Eugene scowled. You beat your breast like a holy roller, but you too will find your way here. You are Amadis, he shouted, and entered. Even priests are men. Leon smiled, and every man is delivered of woman, and must be fulfilled by a woman, and he entered. Andrew, I begged to the last figure, do not enter. Andrew laughed. He paused at the gaily lit door and said, I will make a deal with you, my little brother. I will wait and not enter until you lose your innocence. But innocence is forever, I cried. You are innocent when you do not know, my mother cried, but already you know too much about the flesh and blood of the Mares men. You are innocent until you understand, the priest of the church said, and you will understand good and evil when the communion is placed in your mouth and God fills your body. Oh, where is the innocence I must never lose? I cried into the bleak landscape in which I found myself. And in the swirling smoke, a flash of lightning struck, and out of thunder, a dark figure stepped forth. It was Ultima, and she pointed west to Las Pasturas, the land of my birth. She spoke. There in the land of the dancing plains and rolling hills, there in the land which is the eagles by day and the owls by night is innocence. There where the lonely wind of the llanos sang to the lovers' feet of your birth, there in those hills is your innocence. But that was long ago, I called. I sought more answers, but she was gone, evaporated into a loud noise. I opened my eyes and heard the commotion downstairs. We have to go! We have to go! An excited voice called. It was Eugene. I jumped to the door and peeked into the kitchen. My mother was crying. But why? My father asked. You can find work here. I can get you on a highway crew until summer. Then we can. We don't want to work on the highway, Eugene exploded. They were arguing about leaving, and he was carrying the brunt of the argument. I thought he must be drunk to talk to my father like that. My father was small and thin compared to my brothers, but he was strong. I knew he could still break any one of them in two if he wanted. But he was not mad. He knew he was losing them, and he shrunk back. Eugenio, my mother pleaded, watch your language. Do not defy your father. Now it was my brother's turn to shrink back. Eugene mumbled an apology. They knew that it was within the power of the father to curse his sons, and a curse laid on a disobedient son or daughter was irrevocable. I knew the stories of many bad sons and daughters who had angered their parents to the point of the disowning curse. Those poor children had met the very devil himself, or the earth had opened in their path and swallowed them. In any case, the cursed children were never heard of again. I saw my mother make the sign of the cross, and I too prayed for Eugene. What is it you want? My mother sobbed. You have been gone so long, and now that you have just returned, you want to leave again? And what about California? My father sighed. We don't want to make you sad, Mama. Leon went to her and put his arm around her. We just want to live our own lives. We don't want to go to California, Eugene said emphatically. We just want to be on our own, move to Santa Fe and work. You are forsaking me, my mother cried afresh. There will be no one left to help me move west, my father whispered, and it seemed that a great load was placed on his shoulders. We are not forsaking you, Mama, Andrew said. We are men now, Mama, Jean said. Aye, Mares men, she said stoically and turned to my father. The Mares blood draws them away from home and parents, Gabriel, she said. My father looked at her, then bowed his head. The same wandering blood in his veins was in his son's. The restlessness of his blood had destroyed his dream, defeated him. He understood that now. It was very sad to see. You still have Tony, Leon said. Thanks be to God, my mother said, but there was no joy in her voice. In the morning, Leon and Eugene were gone, but Andrew remained. They had talked long into the night and finally had given up the idea of going with them. I think he did not like to follow their ways, and he wanted to please my mother. Then, too, he had been offered a job at Allen's food market, and so the urge had been offered a job at Then, too, he had been offered a job at Allen's food market, and so the urge for adventure did not pull him away. I was glad. I had always felt close to Andrew, and if I had to lose two of my brothers, I was glad Andrew was not one of them. That morning, I walked to school with Andrew. In that year, I learned to read and write. Miss Maestas was very pleased with me. On the last day of school, she handed out report cards to the other kids. But when it came to me, she took me to the principal's office. He explained to me that I was a little older than the other kids in first grade, that my progress had been very good. Miss Maestas beamed. So instead of passing me from first to second, he was passing me from first to third. What do you think of that? He smiled. Thank you, sir, I said. I was very happy. My mother would be proud of me, and that meant next year I would be in the same grade as the rest of the gang. Your mother will be very pleased, Miss Maestas said. She kissed my cheek. Yes, I said. The principal handed me my report card and a piece of paper. That will explain everything to your parents, he said. He shook my hand, like man to man, and he said, Good luck. There was magic in the letters, and I had been eager to learn the secret. Thank you, sir, I said. The rest of the day we were like goats held by hobbles. At the end of the day, some of the mothers planned a party for our class, but I did not feel like staying because I still felt apart from them, and my mother would not be there. I thanked Miss Maestas for her help, and when the last bell rang, I ran home. The freedom of the summer raced with my footsteps as I worked my way through the sweaty, swarming mob of kids. School is over, was on every tongue. The buses honked nervously for their kids. I waved and the farm kids waved back. We would see each other next fall. By the seesaws, a fight had started, but I didn't want to waste time watching it. Wah! The cry split the air. The vatos from Las Hados ran by. I raced after them, but cut off at Allen's, past the Longhorn Saloon, cut past Rosie's into the bridge. I started across the bridge, and it was the first time I ever remembered talking to it. I sang a song in my mind. Oh, beautiful bridge, I cross you and leave the town. I cross towards the Llano. I climb the hill. I race over the goat path, and I am home. I did not feel it was a silly song. I only felt happy. Tony! Hoofbeats clattered on the concrete, and the hatchet face of the kid passed me by. Pass? Yeah! And he was gone. At the far end of the bridge, he passed Samuel. Samuel! I called. He turned and waited for me. I passed, did you? Oh, yes, he smiled. Those teachers keep passing us right along, he said. Samuel was only in the third grade, but he always seemed wise and old when he talked, kind of like my grandfather. But I passed to the third grade. Next year I'll be in class with you, I bragged. Good, he said. Let's go fishing. Now? Sure. Usually, I only thought of fishing on weekends, but it was true that school was over. The first runoff was just subsiding in the river. There should be a lot of hungry catfish waiting for us. No line, I said. I have some, he said. I thought of my mother. I always went straight home after school. But today, I had something to celebrate. I was growing up and becoming a man, and suddenly I realized that I could make decisions. I will tell you a story, Samuel said after a long silence, a story that was told to my father by Jason's Indian. I listened breathlessly, and the lapping of the water was of like the tide of time sounding on my soul. A long time ago, when the earth was young and only wandering tribes touched the virgin grasslands and drank from the pure streams, strange people came to this land, and they were sent to the valley by their gods. They had wandered lost for many years, but never had they given up faith in their gods, and they were finally rewarded. This fertile valley was to be their home. There were plenty of animals to eat, strange trees that bore sweet fruit, and sweet water to drink for their fields of maize. Were they Indians? I asked when he paused. They were the people, he answered simply and went on. There was only one thing that was withheld from them, and that was the fish called the carp. This fish made his home in the waters of the river, and he was sacred to the gods. For a long time the people were happy. Then came the 40 years of the sun without rain, and crops withered and died. The game was killed, and the people went hungry. To stay alive, they finally caught the carp of the river and ate them. I shivered. I had never heard a story like this one. It was getting late, and I thought of my mother. The gods were very angry. They were going to kill all of the people for their sin. But one kind God who truly loved the people argued against it, and the other gods were so moved by his love that they relented from killing the people. Instead, they turned the people into carp and made them live forever in the waters of the river. The setting sun glistened on the brown waters of the river and turned them to bronze. "It is a sin to catch them," Samuel said. "It is a worse offense to eat them. They are part of the people." He pointed towards the middle of the river, where two huge black fins rose out of the water and splashed upstream. "And if you eat one," I whispered, "you might be punished like they were punished?" "I don't know," Samuel said. He rose and took my fishing line. "Is that all the story?" I asked. He divided the catfish we had caught and gave me my share on a small string. "No, there is more," he said. He glanced around as if to make sure we were alone. "Do you know about the golden carp?" he asked in a whisper. "No," I shook my head. "When the gods had turned the people into carp, the one kind God who loved the people grew very sad. The river was full of dangers to the new fish, so he went to the other gods and told them that he chose to be turned into a carp and swim in the river where he could take care of his people. The gods agreed, but because he was a god, they made him very big and colored him the color of gold, and they made him the lord of all the waters of the valley." "The golden carp," I said to myself, "a new god?" I could not believe this strange story, yet I could not disbelieve Samuel. "Is the golden carp still here?" "Yes," Samuel answered. His voice was strong with faith. It made me shiver, not because it was cold, but because the roots of everything I had ever believed in seemed shaken. If the golden carp was a god, who was the man on the cross? The Virgin? Was my mother praying to the wrong god? "Where?" I wanted to know. "It is very late," Samuel said. "You have learned a lot today. This summer Siko will find you and take you to the golden carp." And with a swish of branches, he disappeared into dusk. "Samuel!" I called. Only silence. I heard Siko's name mentioned before. He was a town boy, but he didn't hang out with them. They said he spent all the time along the river, fishing. I turned homeward in the gathering dusk, full of wonder at the strange story Samuel had told me. "Tony!" someone called. I broke into a run and didn't stop until I got home. When I got home, my mother was very angry with me. I had never been late before. "Nuestra Señora de Guadalupe, I have been crazy with worry about you," she cried. I showed her my promotion, and her feelings changed quickly. "Grande, Deborah, Teresa, come quick. Tony has been promoted 2 grades. Oh, I knew he would be a man of learning, maybe a priest." She crossed herself and sobbed as she held me tightly. Ultima was very happy too. "This one learns as much in one day as most do in a year," she smiled. I wonder if she knew about the golden carp. "We must pray to the Virgin," my mother said, and although Deborah objected, saying nobody prayed for a grade promotion, my mother gathered us around the Virgin's altar. My father arrived home late from work and was hungry. We were still praying, and supper was late. He was angry.